Hey, everybody. How are ya? Hello. Hi. Yo. Youths and non-youths. Olds. Just kidding. All right, y'all. Thanks for coming. Really appreciate it. Thanks to WNYC Studios. How cool. Do you guys know Michelle Buteau? She has a show here. I haven't been to one yet, but I came in and I was like, okay, it's time to come back. This is really good. Give it up to Don Will. Woo! So, Generator, we're still kind of forming what Generator is, and these live events have really accelerated for us, like our purpose and understanding what we are. We're a collective that is focused on encouraging people to use their platform. Now we all have platforms, social media platforms. We all have a voice and followers. And you know, I always say, like, I love bikini pics from your vacay. Like, I'm like, yes, you know what I mean? Like, cool, you know? And like, you know what I mean? But it's like, can one of 8 posts be about how the government is affecting our lives? You know, just like sprinkle in some reality so we all stay in reality, because we have like a fake president and the reality seems fake, but he's in there. Yeah, and so we have these 2 camera videos that generators record where they say their name, where they're from, all this, and just something that's affecting them from the government. And it can be affecting your life, your body, your everyday, you know, minutia, whatever, or it can be, you know, this sucks. I'm not trans and I'm not in the military, but it sucks that the military is trying to ban trans people from joining. You know, it can just be like, it's bumming me out. That's real, you know? So you have the opportunity to take those videos with guidance, because it turns out they're more challenging than we thought originally. So just a couple things. I wanted to dedicate this show. You could throw up the photo of my friend Kevin. My friend Kevin passed away last week, if you heard about him, a great comic. I just wanted to, I can't do the show without just saying him. Oh, hope he enjoys this show this evening. There's also like some bits that I can like only do at Generator. It's like they don't work for like stand-up. Does anybody here listen to Democracy Now? Sorry, WNYC, but anybody? Okay, like every day I'm listening to Democracy Now! And I'm like, oh, thank you, Amy Goodman, for like just humorless news reads. You know what I mean? Like all these other like anchors are like, they have like stank on it. Like, and it's like, I know, I'm pissed too. You know what I mean? I'm disgusted too. What is reality? Like, I'm right there with you, but Amy Goodman reads it like a cold stone bitch, and I fucking appreciate it. But I have to play for you, okay, so the contrast of the funky theme music times Amy Goodman's Jewish witch cold stone reads. I just wanted to play it for you. Today's theme song. Whoever got it. Now listen to the news be read. Get ready. It's gonna be depressing.
From New York, this is Democracy Now!
No, keep going. You got to hear like the terrible headlines, if you can. Who got it, Ernie? Hold on, it's okay. It's okay, nothing matters, it's fine.
Economic crisis caused in part by falling oil prices and broad U.S. sanctions. We'll have more on the crisis unfolding in Venezuela after headlines. On Capitol Hill.
But this is usually rolling with like... Yeah, okay, here we go, ready? And we're just gonna play through to hear the awful shit that's happening. Here we go. Never get sick of that beat.
From New York, this is Democracy Now!
So funky, I'm feeling it, but...
I have decided to break diplomatic and political relations with the imperialist government of the United States. Out of Venezuela they go. Enough interventionism. There is dignity here. Here, there are people to defend this land.
Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro accuses the United States of orchestrating a coup after President Trump recognized the leadership of Juan Guaido, the head of the opposition-led Venezuelan National Assembly,
You got
who
the point.
declared himself president.
I just was like, I can't stand up. It's like, people are like, what? Talk about shit and dick. You know what I mean? It's like, I just had to tell you guys that. And another thing that, like, you know, Generator's like aggregator or partnership culture. So we, you know, I want to like show you all the things that I'm into. So one thing, does anybody know Indivisible? Just another thing I wanted to show you. I went to my first Indivisible meeting earlier this year, and it was great. It's a great way. It's a grassroots organization that connects all different grassroots organizations in the country. And if you're like nervous that you're going to sign up and be like, I can't go to a protest tonight, you know what I mean? Like you feel like you might like be pressured to do something that you're not prepared to do. I also just wanted to show you this graphic of this email that I got. Like, it's also like a different level of news. So you can sign up, just get the news, and it's not oppressive or whatever. I mean, specifically not oppressive, but it's like, it's not like expecting something from you. It's a different level of news to understand like how shit actually came together. You know, it's different than CNN or whatever. It's not telling you like as a media story, but actually how it happened from the ground up. So just wanted to share those helpful tips. Yeah, I hope that you guys make generator videos. Again, it's like harder than you think. It's hard for me. I'm like a performer and it's hard for me, but that's why we like provide the support for it here. And it's good. It's grounding and it reminds us that reality exists and that the government's affecting us every day. So tonight we are focusing on the public advocate race. We have activists as usual, Generator Live events. I've been interviewing activists and politicians and like comparing and contrasting how they serve the people and also how they intend to serve the people. The public advocate race, nobody really knows what the fuck it is. I never heard of the words together before. You know what I mean? I'm like, public advocate. Oh, no, I know. You know, but I don't know. I never heard of it until Generator. Like I only know of it because of this event, embarrassingly enough. But also nobody knows anything. So we're gonna meet them. But first, before we meet the PA advocates, because they had like a forum tonight, we're also gonna meet some amazing activists. This first one is this kid. I can't even tell you. I met Vic on the train, and this is before Generator had a live event series. And Vic's like, "Oh, are you from Broad City?" And I'm like, "Yep." And I was like, "What are you into?" And Vic, it like revealed to me that they sued. They're 19 years old. They're suing the federal government for endangering the youth by ignoring science and climate change. I was like, I like lost my mind. I was like, you're kidding me. That makes me feel so good that you exist. Holy fucking shit, you're amazing. They were like, nah, no. I was like, no, hello, listen to me, you're amazing. So I'm like talking to Vic on the train, and then I can't get them out of my mind, and thus the Generator series was born. I was like, I gotta talk to Vic, but I have to share it because this is like too valuable and like life-giving and miraculous to not share. So we've had Vic on the show before, but they are now in the middle of the trial. What? Unreal, incredible. In the middle of the trial against the federal government, and we're gonna check in with them. So give it up for Vic Barrett. Okay, so, hi Vic.
Hey.
You're why the Generator show exists. Good job. Vic, are you still 19?
Yes.
I mean, what? You know what I mean? So, can you just tell everyone how you got to the point of suing the federal government for endangering the youth? for climate change? Can you just LOL summarize, but also, kind of summarize?
Yeah. I was in my freshman year of high school, basically, and I was in my Global 9 class learning history, and they had this nonprofit organization come in called Global Kids. And I had just moved from further upstate New York, and I wanted to get to know the city and, start learning more. So I went to this program called the Human Rights Activist Project. And I was like, okay, this seems cool. We're going to learn about human rights and social justice, and those are all things I care about. And then by the second meeting, they were like, our campaign is going to be focusing on climate change. And at first I was like, what does that have to do with human rights or social justice or anything, really? Like, I don't personally like science a lot. And I was like, oh, no.
Even if science sucks, it's real.
Yeah.
Just saying, just highlighting, just reminding us. Okay, anyway, go on.
So basically just after learning about the ways that climate change manifests in people's lives and the social justice scale and how people of color and how low-income people are disproportionately impacted, I just couldn't ignore the issue, basically.
Can you just give a few examples of, on a day-to-day, how poor people are worse affected by climate change than people with money and resources?
Yeah, just statistically speaking, areas that are of lower income, even in New York City, areas in Queens and areas in the South Bronx have much higher levels of asthma rates, much higher levels of food justice issues such as food deserts, and that's obviously a huge part of people's environment. Even looking at Hurricane Sandy, we find that a lot of low income and public housing is more likely to be built in areas susceptible to natural disaster and to flooding and to climate change.
Like on the edges of the island, closer to the water, less protected.
Exactly. Yeah.
Great.
And learning those things and just learning that people like me, and people like me not just in New York, but people like me all over the country, all over the world, were being harmed by this issue that they weren't contributing to in the same way that institutions and politicians who are making the active decisions to pollute our earth were doing. And, being an activist when you're 13 and 14 and can't really vote is kind of hard, especially to influence council members. So me and my friends definitely dropped in on a few Christmas parties and knocked on a few doors that we probably shouldn't
politicians.
have. To try to get their attention, to try to get them to, the campaign we were working on was to mandate climate education in New York City public schools. Because we were like, if we're going to engage our peers, they need to know what the issue is. And just having that experience in climate advocacy and then being introduced to Our Children's Trust and to their idea of taking legal action. It just seemed to make a lot of sense to me.
Right, so Our Children's Trust got involved with you guys, and they're like the legal side. Their activism is through lawsuits, I guess.
Well, yeah, Our Children's Trust is the nonprofit organization that facilitates and sponsors and allows the lawsuit to happen. And they've been working on this for years. They have lawsuits in states all over the country, actually, against state governments. They've been working on this idea of constitutional law as a way to fight climate change for a while. So
Gotcha.
It's a dope organization for sure.
So when did the trial begin?
Well, actually, we're not in trial yet.
Just kidding. I was joking and nobody stopped me. You know what I mean? Like, I was like testing you. So.
Yeah, so we've been working on this lawsuit actually since August of 2015. A lot of hearings, a lot of appeals to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. We've had appeals to the Supreme Court at this point. But basically where we're at right now with the whole process is we're trying to get to trial, but the federal government has taken unprecedented actions in appealing so much of our case before we've been able to even get to that point. Because
you had a victory last time, I guess in November, where the Supreme Court didn't let the federal government not move forward or something, right? What was that?
Yeah, see, it's exactly that confusing where it's like...
They're like, we don't not believe not science.
Exactly. So just like speaking to that, like not speaking as a lawyer, but as a plaintiff, seeing that the way that the government is abusing their power over a system that we're trying to use that was created for us in order to further their own agenda, which at this point is just profit over, 21 young kids just telling them, like, we know you're throwing away our future and we'd really, really like it if you'd stop.
Right. Yeah, give it up. So remember we were like FaceTiming, like maybe around the election about me and my co-founder Glennis went to Madison and we did some like canvassing and pumping up canvassers. So around that time, remember you were like talking about a deposition in Oregon?
Oh, I had a deposition in Madison, actually.
In Madison. So is this part of the trial? And it's just constant like hearings and depositions, but it's like, it seems pretty like minutiae, where you're like going into like a poorly lit office, and, right? Like, what does it look like? What does it feel like?
So the deposition actually was a Department of Justice lawyer coming to Madison with one of my lawyers and sitting down with me at like a Holiday Inn conference room somewhere.
Cool.
And yeah, it was awesome. It was a party. And just asking me a lot of questions about about my part of the case. And basically, you know, like there's a lot of, I feel weird saying that, there's a lot of adults in this room who probably knew more about what a deposition was like before I did. So I still have a hard time explaining what a deposition was.
I don't know what a fucking deposition is.
But it was nervous.
I was like, they're on trial.
I was nervous.
I didn't know. I don't fucking know what's going on. Who cares? You're smarter than everyone here. You know what I mean? Don't worry about it. It doesn't matter. Truly, no offense, but you guys don't look that bright. You know what I mean? No, but seriously, it's like I don't know what a fucking deposition is. So you're just partying at a Holiday Inn with a random lawyer. So it's just been going on for 3 years.
Yeah, a lot of back and forth. And, you know, like at the end of the day, like I said, it's just a lot about government accountability, a lot about what the case is about in the first place. Them dodging us and them doing this back and forth with us, them using the legal system that they created against us. It's just all part of what we're talking about in the first place, which is the fact that they're not thinking for the people. They're thinking for themselves and for their own intentions and for political power, whatever that means.
I'm like, how does it feel to be, let's say, a 50-year-old, let's just say, white dude, and there's like 20 teenagers being like, we caught you, bro. We know what your deal is. And they're not being accountable for it. It's crazy. And like, I'm not like, oh, Vic's a child. Like, I don't think of you that way, but it's like, to me, like under 21, it's like, technically, these are children telling you what you're doing. That you got caught by kids.
Yeah, our youngest plaintiff is 11 years old.
LOL. I'm LOLing at these fucking ghouls. Fucking idiots.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
I am allowed to curse, I checked. Wow. Unbelievable.
So if you could imagine like hearings with, you know, just 21 kids age like 11 to 22 sitting in the front row, and just government, like Department of Justice lawyers, people that, you know, are supposed to be accountable to us. That's how I feel the government is supposed to work. You know, it's for us. And just like sitting there and arguing to a federal judge that we have no standing to fight for our future.
And what do they say?
To our face.
I don't even get, like, what do they say? Are they like, well, youth? Like, what do they say? How do they do this? Honestly, I'm like, how do they fucking sit there and not, I mean, is their stomach grumbling? Is their faces losing color? Literally, what does it look like?
Well, it's just, it's a lot of circles. It's a lot of playing with words, a lot of, you know, things like saying, you know, fine, maybe climate change is real, but can you prove to the exact extent how much the U.S. federal government has contributed its emissions to, contribute to your life specifically at home? That's kind of like the type of questions, like, in deposition, like, can you calculate like what carbon emissions could have been let into the air that would have impacted or instigated Hurricane Sandy to hit New York? No.
I am not God. No. You think I know? First of all, I'm in school, you fucking idiot. You're an adult out in the world. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, but...
And you guys must have the info. Like, you must know, I mean... You're like, your brains are fresh. You must have all that info ready to go. So what does he say when you're like, yeah, you know what I mean? Like, and then what do you say?
Yeah.
I can't, you know what I mean? Like, I can't even believe this.
Yeah. I mean, and we have a lot of plaintiffs on our case that are also super, really science savvy. And I would have loved to sit in on their depositions and have seen them just answered to the T.
So is it solo? It's you alone?
Yeah, so it's just
and they're
you
out of
with
the room.
Department of Justice
nice.
lawyer.
That sounds
and your
fair.
lawyer.
You know what I mean? I don't want to be alone in a room with like suits. You know what I mean? It's like, yikes. So it's one at a time. You go into a room to...
Well, they went to where we live. So they came to where we were to come take our depositions. And also when it comes to the facts and when it comes to what we're presenting them, you know, a large part of why they're avoiding this at the end of the day is because we do have really strong experts. We have experts who won Nobel Prizes in their field, and it's hard for them to find experts that can argue what they're trying to argue.
they're like also evangelical priests.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, who's your expert? Satan? You know what I mean? Like, who's your expert? Damn.
Yeah.
Damn.
I'm pretty sure.
Whew. It sounds like garbage. It sounds like trash, full trash.
Yeah.
It sounds like nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
Unbelievable that you're like thrusting yourself willfully into this nonsense at this age. It's really brave. Let me say this. So I love Democracy Now!, as you like already learned, and I'm watching about the Poland environmental conference, and I see fucking Vic in the video. And then we're texting, Vic's in Poland, fighting for climate change. Tell us. I mean, it's just, you're a star.
So, I went to Poland for the UNFCCC COP24 climate conference.
Hold on. UNFCCC COP24 climate conference. Look at me. I'm a genius. And this was what Trump wasn't going to go to or whatever, but then he sent like a rep or something?
Yeah. So the United States, most countries send, like whole parties of negotiators. They set up a pavilion where they show off what they're working on, and they do panels at their pavilion throughout the trip. Where the U.S. pavilion was supposed to be on the map was empty. There was nothing there. It was just a box, and they sent one panel. For the U.S. federal government, and it was about fossil fuels as a way of progressing towards the future. Yeah.
Let me also say, I like Amy Goodman's my like favorite celebrity. You know what I mean? Like I'm a nerd, so I'm texting with her. She said that the place was.
Well, you were texting her?
Yeah, I freaking text her, bitch. But only after the fact. But I was just like, Happy New Year, what's up, or whatever. And, you know what I mean? Just like, hey, Amy Goodman. But she said that the place was designed to look like a coal mine, the conference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Actually,
have you ever heard of something more fucking tactless and tacky?
It gets worse. Poland's country pavilion was coal black, and their floor was glass with coal underneath it, and they were handing out coal soap actually to patrons. And every shuttle to the COP24 conference was sponsored by Poland gas and oil companies. So, yeah, it wasn't a friendly space by any means.
Good to know. Okay, good to know. So, tell about this U.S. thing, because I saw the video. It was amazing.
Yeah, so a lot of young people from the United States, a lot of frontlines communities in the United States, knowing that COP24 a lot of the times provides false solutions, and it's a lot of negotiators doing a whole lot of nothing. You have the opportunity to go as an observer and as civil society and engage with the conference as much as you can. And so we found out that the Trump administration was doing this fossil fuel panel, and we felt that was really messed up because, we're from the United States. That's not what we want our representation to be at this conference. That's not how we feel at all. And so what we decided to do and what we planned with some organizations like It Takes Roots, which is Indigenous Frontlines people, and our organization, Sustain Us, which is young Frontlines people from the United States, we decided to interrupt the panel. And take over the mic and allow our own narrative into the space. Yeah,
give it up. It was so funny.
Yeah, so the way that we decided to do that was, this was a big room, kind of like this, except like bigger, where there's a middle section and then these two sections on the end.
And a lot more like death vibes. Or
We're
going to kill you vibes.
So we managed to fill this whole middle section of the room with activists and young people and frontlines people. And we had like people in the crowd to cue us. And after the guy from the Trump administration gave his speech about fossil fuel, we just broke out into massive laughter.
They go, ha! And the guy was like, ha.
Yeah,
he didn't know what was going on.
So
he was made a fool of.
Yeah,
even more so.
We just said like, these false solutions are hilarious. Like but this also is not a laughing matter. And we got to the front of the room and unfoiled a "Keep It in the Ground" banner, and we had I spoke, another young person from India spoke, a Frontlines woman from the Diné community spoke. And we just took over the room, and it was great. There was a lot of angry fossil fuel execs who were screaming very nasty things the entire time.
And on the panel, they're like, they don't know what? You know what I mean? They had nothing. They had nothing. And that's why I can't believe that's like this sort of representational version at this conference, but you're in the day-to-day with this trial and whatever, depositions, whatever that means. And, it's like in both situations, how can they just flat out lie? But I guess they just clench their buttholes and they do it. And they just right? I'm just like, you don't have an anus anymore. Like it's just closed and fused up and they're just literally full of shit.
And I mean, going to Poland, especially thinking, sorry.
And that sounded LOL. I'm cool. Young people like that. Also, it was like terrifying. I was like, "You're going to Poland?" Just so brave. You went alone.
Yeah, I mean,
Crazy.
It was a great community of young people around me, but I've never traveled in that same way.
Scary, dude. And also, it's like, what, Poland? You know what I mean? I'm like, huh? You know what I mean? Who goes to Poland?
Yeah,
it's scary.
It was definitely really tense, and there's a lot of tense political things over there, authoritarian governments, and a really fastly growing far right movement that was definitely like crazy to think about. Also, while being there, a lot of conversations we had to have beforehand about safety and when we're going to be engaging with UN police and when we're going to be engaging with Polish police and what that has to look like. I avoided the Polish police. I saw a Polish police officer. I was like, bet. But yeah, I mean, going back to what you were saying, just about how politicians are, I think that, I went to COP21 in Paris when I was 16 years old. And
hold on, just let everybody take that in. Wow. Okay, cool. You're amazing. It takes a lot to process, honestly.
Thank you.
Okay, so you went to the Paris Climate Conference at 16.
And I remember being really excited.
Unbelievable. Amazing.
And just really like enamored by the process. And I was like, there's history happening here. And this is, what works. And that was also like right after I joined the lawsuit. And after being in this lawsuit, after
2015.
Yeah. Yep. After
you're 19, LOL. It's crazy. You're so smart. But keep going, sorry.
Doing other work and being in Poland and just seeing how, the US government, the UN, these people who are supposed to be making political decisions that impact our everyday lives, at the end of the day, they're just not the solution. And I don't think they're ever going to be. And I think that we're seeing in a lot of young people and just a lot of people who are engaged in what's happening in the world now, we're realizing that it has less to do with political power and more to do with people power and how we influence the politics. Because at the end of the day, it's meant to serve us. We're the constituents. We're the people who need to live here and breathe here and thrive here and enjoy it. And if our government can't do that for us, we have every right to hold them accountable to that. And I think that...
Sing it. Fucking sing it.
Yeah. And I think that, getting engaged in any movement right now is not about looking at what's happening in the press, but what's looking at the grassroots movement and who's on the front lines and who's really talking about it and being hit by it, like in the home, in the heart, and like who's really there to like have the resilience and have the needs, especially when we're talking about an issue like climate change, where, the people who've been dealing with this issue for the longest time and the people who've always been ignored are the ones who have the solutions to deal with it because they have a sense of urgency.
Right.
They have, they have to do it because this is their livelihood. They've always had to survive. People of color, poor people, marginalized people have always had to survive. And so we're the ones that people need to be turning to for the solutions and how we're going to fix this issue because we're definitely not represented in our current political system at all. So, yeah.
Insane. Let me ask you one last thing. You just saying that, Shirley Chisholm, the first Black female congresswoman, and she wrote this book, Unbought and Unbossed. She, one thing is like, she was like, in her book, she like describes going from Brooklyn to Albany, and it's like in the 60s, and it's like, it hasn't changed at all or whatever. And she's, like just feeling that distance of driving hours and hours. It's like, how can you not live in a community and drive that far? How can you make decisions just on people you don't like see or know? Mm-hmm. It's just illustrated well. But also she said in her book, this thing that I just want to ask if you think it's true, and she's saying this in like, the 60s, and I feel like maybe at this point she would be like, JK, the system's fucked. But she says in her book, she's like, I think the system is a good system. It's just being corrupted. But I think the system, the design of it, in practice is corrupt and shitty, but in theory is effective. Like, What do you think that the system that we have in place, are you trying to disrupt the system, work within it to win it, play the game to win the game? Like, what's your feeling on that high level version of it?
I think that's an intersection that a lot of young activists are finding themselves on right now, trying to understand, like, is this going to work for us? Is this sustainable? Because personally, for me, I've just seen it not working for my whole life.
Right.
And especially not working for me, being Black, being queer, being Latinx, being young. It's just, I don't see it working for me. But I think that, also being a political science student and, studying the American government and caring about it and, like, looking at the ways it's worked and the way that it's supposed to work, it's hard for me to separate the theory of what it's supposed to be and how it's come to be where it is now, because it's just so deeply ingrained, like we've had it for so long. And I think that it's just hard for me to believe at this point that there's a path that's business as usual. That's where we're at. That's just like, well, let's put somebody else in office that we agree with, and then, let everything trickle down and work out for everybody at the end of the day. Right. That's with issues like climate change, with issues like trans people being murdered every day, with issues like families being separated at the border, there's a sense of urgency for me that doesn't really have any interest in, like, waiting for the political process to, like, start caring about people.
Understood. Understood. Give it up for Vic Barrett. Can you believe? Can you believe? I am astounded. Oh my gosh, she shook. I can't believe. We just keep in touch. We just want to see how this is doing. This trial and Vic's work is gonna they're a shooting star. Oh my goodness, wow. So the system's fucked. Okay, good to know. Cool. I'm gonna sit here, so I just face you guys, because then the segment after I'm gonna sit back there. Okay, wow, that was illuminating and frightening. Okay, so our next guest is an activist and also like an expert, an activist through journalism. We had Ari Berman on in our last series. He is an expert on voter suppression. Let's get right to it. Give it up for Ari Berman. Woo! Okay, I would had my back to you guys, so I just wanted to switch it up. How you doing, Ari?
Good to see you again.
You too. I met Ari a while ago because his wife is also a journalist, and I don't know, we have friends in common, and then it turned to be that Ari is like the #1 premier expert on voter suppression of our generation. And I was like, oh, LOL, didn't realize that.
Very LOL expert.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I honestly was like, LOL. This guy's a stoner. You know what I mean? When I first met him, I was like, let's blaze, bro. And then I was like, he really knows stuff. But they're not mutually exclusive. But I'm just saying, I don't know. You know what I mean? Whatever. So, Ari, when you came to Generator last time, you blew our fucking minds. You blew the tops, you know what I mean? Like our heads off with voter suppression, how... you hear about it and you're like, gerrymandering sucks, you know what I mean? But like, then to hear the specific shit, like it's the minutia, like with Vic's trial, to be like, what does it feel like? Like, I want to know on the daily. And just this example that I was remembering about the version of voter suppression that you are familiar with, where maybe this is still true, in Texas, you can get a gun, you can vote with a gun ID and not a student ID.
Yeah.
Is that still true?
That's
I was hoping it changed.
They didn't change the law after the last election, I can assure you that.
They didn't change it for the next Generator series? That sucks. Unbelievable. So that's still true. So Ari's going to enlighten us more. So listen, after the November elections, we were texting, and I like texting. And you were kind of stoked. You said that like some good shit had happened. And yeah. It was such a relief to get the chance to be optimistic, So tell us what good shit went down.
It was weird for me too, because, I cover voter suppression, I cover voting rights, and it's pretty much been all bad news since I started covering this. I've been covering this since 2011, when all of these states became Republican, places like Wisconsin and North Carolina and Texas. And it was just like one bad thing after another was passed, like laws requiring like forms of ID that you never needed before, or cutting back on the amount of time that people had to vote, or closing polling places and doing like really crazy stuff where you'd say like, what's the big deal with requiring an ID, for example? And then you'd see the details where, you could vote with a gun permit but not a student ID, and you started understanding that there was like more to it. But what happened in the last election, which was really interesting, so we still saw a lot of voter suppression. I just want to make that clear, and we can talk about that. In places like Georgia and North Dakota and Florida, there was a lot of voter suppression. So it's not like that went away. But there was another part of the election, which was actually a lot of states passed really good reforms to voting, and they did it through ballot initiatives, which I thought was really cool, because it was basically people themselves saying, we're sick of the suppression, we want to do something else. So 8 states passed ballot initiatives to expand voting rights or to crack down on gerrymandering, which was huge because basically since 2010, almost half the country has passed laws making it harder to vote. So that was like one pendulum.
And what was before that?
Well, I mean, but before that,
it was dope? No way.
It was better. I mean, basically what happened is the backstory here is Obama wins in 2008. There is not just the first black president, but there's this huge turnout of younger people, of people of color. The stat that I always cite was that there were 5 million new voters in 2008. And of those 5 million new voters, 2 million were African American, 2 million were Latino, 600,000 were Asian American. So nearly all the growth of the electorate was from people of color and young people. And these demographics voted 75% for President Obama. So that literally made Republicans' head explode. They're like, we can do 2 things. We can change our policies. It became very, very clear that was not happening. Or we can reach back to a very old strategy in American history, which is you prevent people that disagree with you from voting in the first place. That's why when our country was founded, our founders, despite saying all men were created equal, of course they left out women, they only said white male property owners could vote. And that's why after the Civil War,
they're like, that's just like an idea.
Those are just nice words.
All men are created equal, you know what I mean? But not really.
But not really. Yeah, exactly. And, after the Civil War, when for the first time there was integrated government in the South, and there are black governors and senators in places like Mississippi, which we still haven't seen, that's when we start seeing things like poll taxes and literacy tests and straight up lynchings and mass murder in the South. So, I mean, anytime the power shifts, that's when you see attacks on voting, because voting is about power. And so that's what was going on after Obama's election, when Republicans got control of all of these states. So what happened in the last election was that basically people said, let's just go around the politicians altogether. Let's just go straight to the people and let's ask them, do you want to make it easier to vote? And people overwhelmingly said yes. So, for example, in Florida, they did a thing that restored voting rights to up to 1.4 million people with past felony convictions, which was amazing.
Let's give a second for that.
Florida had this insane law that dated back all the way to Jim Crow. So, here's what happened in Florida. In Florida, after the Civil War, there were more black than white registered voters, which was huge. You go from slavery to then having more black than white registered voters. And so you couldn't just outright prevent people from voting, because that's why we passed the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th Amendment to the Constitution, so that people would have equal rights. So what they did is they created all of these things that you could become a felon for, like vagrancy, standing on a street corner, suddenly was a felony. And then they enforced those laws in totally discriminatory ways, so that African Americans were disproportionately being locked up. And then they said, oh, now you're a felon? By the way, you can't vote. That's how whites took back power after the Civil War in Florida. And that law was still on the books until basically November 6th of this year. So that was one really amazing thing that happened.
I need to process that. That is insane. Florida was in the Jim Crow South.
Yeah, they were still in the Jim Crow South. I mean, they
until 2018.
They had a law that prevented 1 in 10 people in Florida, including 1 in 5.
1 in 10?
1 in 10 people in Florida, 1 in 5 African Americans from voting.
1 in 5.
It was crazy to me, because we had two.
Fuck.
We had two.
I mean, it's just fucking crazy. And you know it, and it's like up here and around here, but then when you get the fucking details, it's like, oof.
So we had a governor's race in Florida that was decided by 30,000 votes. We had a Senate race in Florida that was decided by 10,000 votes. And 1.4 million people just couldn't vote in the election.
Right.
So, I mean, that's where you start to see how your vote matters.
Right.
When this many people are disenfranchised and the elections are this close. So
But
that
those
was one of really...
were voted into being able to vote now.
Yes. Theoretically. Yeah. They now have the ability to register to vote. There's some technicalities I'm not going to bore you with, but basically,
well,
yes.
no, I do want to, like, I wanted to ask you, like, is it for real, or are they going to just get fucked in a second way? You know what I mean?
Well,
like, how are we going to make sure, how can we as the people make sure that, I'm in New York, how can I make sure somebody in Florida gets registered?
Well, what's been interesting about Florida is there's been a lot of national attention around this. So, like, this is just a microcosm of a much bigger issue, but, like, there was a lot of national attention on this. And actually, this was a weird area where there was amazingly some common ground between liberals and conservatives. Like, you had the ACLU and the Koch brothers on the right who, like, disagree about everything and, like, think one another is evil, but, like, they both supported this because they felt like people deserve a second chance in society. And by the
Koch
way,
brothers did?
there was a lot of white Republicans who can't vote in Florida either. Yeah, it's kind of amazing. I know.
Why not?
I say that to people, and they're like, the Koch brothers, and I'm like, yeah, they're horrible on 99.9% of things, but, like, you have to give them credit on this one thing.
I was just thinking about that today, where how Trump, like, passes, I mean, he's passed, like, 2 things that were positive or whatever. I'm like, that's just, like, strategic chaos.
Wait, what were
right?
the 2 things?
I think the one thing was, like, the bump stocks, to ban the bump stocks. It was like, bro, that's dope. You know what I mean? I was like, okay, that is excellent. And that does deserve to be looked at, I guess, but it feels like a strategy thing.
Well, it was like
chaos.
the most minor thing they could have done on guns. Like, let's ban bump stocks, but not the automatic weapons that are killing people in our communities every single day.
Right.
You know, so I would take that off your good thing list.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I would put it down to 1. I'm not sure what the other one thing is, but I would take that off.
I don't know what the other thing is.
Okay, yeah, I don't know what it is either.
I think that's...
I'm trying, but, you know, in a spirit of common ground, but I'm not.
But, yeah, fuck them. I don't fucking care. But so the Koch brothers, I'm just like, what is this strategy? Honestly, why that? Because of the white Republicans.
I mean, I think number one, there are a lot of white Republicans that can't vote.
Why? Because they're felons?
They commit crimes too.
Right.
I mean, like, you know, like, you go to, like, the panhandle of Florida, there are a lot of white Republicans who are behind bars. And then the other thing is there have been libertarians. This is true. There have been libertarian-minded people in the Republican Party. They've mostly been losing, but they have basically been arguing that the war on drugs is a failure, that mass incarceration is a huge problem, that we're locking way too many people up, that the prison state is an example of big government. And so there is a critique on the right of mass incarceration. And there is an argument on the right for giving people their rights back. And I think, to me, you know, this amendment needed 60% of the vote to pass. So you can't do it with Democrats. You can't do it with progressives. Wow. You've got to be able to find common ground. And what I found really interesting about the thing in Florida was, when you think of restoring voting rights to people with past felony convictions, it's thought of as a quote unquote liberal issue. And what I thought was cool was that in a state that's so divided, where the elections were 50-50 to the extreme, this passed with 64% of the vote.
Wow.
That when you went to Republicans and you asked them, should we give people a second chance? Should we make it easier for them to vote? Will that make them more productive citizens? A lot of Republicans said yes, too. And that tells me that, like, on the political level, politicians are totally invested in voter suppression. But the voters are kind of sick of it.
Right. That's positive, and that's clarifying. Damn.
Got to get what you can these days.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. How is this going to be enforced? How do we, like, they have the ability to register to vote. Now they got to register. These 1.4 million formerly convicted felons.
Well, they're starting to register. I mean, it was amazing. So I wrote an article about this for Mother Jones, and one of the main people I wrote about was this guy, Desmond Mead, who was an African-American man. He actually used to be a bodyguard. He was like a bodyguard to Arnold Schwarzenegger and Tupac and all these people. And he had some problems with the law. He had a big drug problem. He was in and out of jail. The last time he was in jail, he was in jail for having a gun as a convicted felon. And so he got a 15-year sentence. He got out after 3 years. And basically when he got out, he was totally lost. He couldn't find work. He was addicted to drugs. He was suicidal. He went on the train tracks in Miami, and he waited for the train to come. And he was just, that was it for him. The train never came. He walked 2 blocks away, checked himself into a drug treatment center, got clean, got his degree in the halfway house or the rehabilitation center, then got a law degree, graduated magna cum laude. But even after going from being suicidal to being a lawyer, he still couldn't vote in Florida because of this felon disenfranchisement law. So he literally started driving around the state of Florida and basically saying, what are we going to do to restore rights to people like me? And at first it was like a totally quixotic thing. I mean, nobody gave him the time of day, but as this became a bigger issue, as voting rights became a bigger issue, he ended up becoming the leader of the fight to restore voting rights to people with past convictions. And what was amazing is when I went down there, the people leading the effort to restore voting rights to ex-offenders were ex-offenders themselves, but they couldn't vote. So the number one interest group that was most affected by this policy couldn't actually vote for it. And so they had to get a huge coalition together to do this. And recently in January, he was able to go down to the Board of Elections and he was able to register for the first time in like 20 years. And I mean, it was amazing.
Desmond Mead. We'll post that article. Shit.
I called him that day. I called him and I called another guy who he was working with. And I mean, it was just, they were just so emotional. And they said, you can't understand the power of the vote until it's taken away from you. That's when you really understand the stakes of this. And so people are doing it. And the thing is, they're not going to be denied. Like, they are such a political force in Florida. They have such moral clarity with their message that I think this is now, to some extent, transcended politics, which is very, 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 very difficult to do. Transcended party.
Yeah.
That it wasn't like, are you a Democrat? Are you a Republican? Right. It was like, can you vote or can you not vote?
Right.
And that's what bonded them together. And the funny thing is, Desmond Mead's basically his right-hand man was this guy who was a chief of staff to a Republican congressman, this guy Neil Volz, who worked for Jack Abramoff, who in the Bush years was like the biggest Republican lobbyist in Washington and was like the biggest crook in Washington, basically bought off all of these Republican members of Congress. This was a huge pay-to-play scandal. A bunch of them went to jail, including this guy. So you have like a guy who was nothing standing on the train tracks. Then you have another guy who was a lobbyist and chief of staff to a Republican congressman. Yeah. They don't have anything in common. Right. But what they had in common was they both couldn't vote.
Wow.
And they both need a second chance in society. And so it's an amazing story. And I just saw like 2 days ago, Neil, the former lobbyist, posted a picture of his voter registration card that he just got in the mail. So at a time when a lot of shit is really fucked up in this country, this is a story that is really like giving me some hope.
And you know what this reminds me of? We've been talking just around Generator and in Generator about human rights politics versus anti-human rights politics, because it's like, party, who fucking cares? Like, now it just seems to be like everything is so divided that it's like you are for humanity or you are against humanity. Vic Barrett is talking to people who are against humanity. You can't tell me that judge who's like, but how is it really affecting you? You know what I mean? I'm like, that's anti-human rights politics. And that's what this is. Like, it's your human right to vote when we live in a society where vote is what creates the law.
Well, for sure. I mean, voting is the cornerstone of a democracy. So you can't talk about democracy without talking about voting. And I think that's one of the things where people ask, how did we get someone like Trump elected? Well, the fact that the right to vote itself was diminished for so many people explains a lot of how someone like Donald Trump could be able to win in the first place. But so there was just a hearing in Congress today about voting rights, and it was like the Democrats were on one side and the Republicans were on one side, and they kept, it was like they were in two different universes. But the fascinating thing for me is when these 8 ballot initiatives passed for things like restoring voting rights to ex-felons and doing automatic voter registration and cracking down on gerrymandering. It passed in Utah.
Wow.
It passed in Missouri. It passed in Florida. It passed overwhelmingly in Michigan, which Trump won. It passed overwhelmingly in Colorado, which is a swing state. So what's fascinating to me is like the politicians are arguing about this. The voters, they support this. Right. So like that's the fascinating thing. Just like Just go around the politicians, just take them out of it, and we can start making some progress on these issues.
In which case, like, what Vic was alluding to, that the system does need to be like thrown out. That is kind of it. Like the system that was, the theoretical one where it's a democracy for the people is the one that still kind of stands, but the one that was actually implemented in place with the politicians between the voters and the policies is the one that needs to be thrown out.
Well, it's tough to have democracy for the people because nobody ever really wanted it. I mean, our founders didn't want it, and there was a very long history of people not wanting democracy for the people, that being threatened for one reason or another by this whole concept of majority rule, that if the will of the people was in fact put into effect, then the privileged elites, they were going to lose power. And that's always what's been animating things, whether it was at the founding of our country or after the Civil War or today. It's always been about people in power feeling threatened by people without power taking power.
Well, then how did it move forward? You know what I mean? Like, how did the people founding this country didn't want power to the people? Then why did they write all that shit? You know what I mean? Like, I was watching, I'm obsessed with Native America on PBS. It is so good if you haven't seen it. And my husband and I were watching, and we like learned how, like, literally like Benjamin Franklin, they like stole the idea of democracy from the Native Americans. I'm like, what are you stealing it for if you like hate it so much? How and why do you see it as being implemented?
I think they were very conflicted. Like, I think that they not to be sympathetic to the.
That must have been hard for Benjamin Franklin.
I mean, I think they wanted to be free, right? They didn't want to be under English domination
They didn't
anymore.
want to pay taxes in the last country.
But they wanted to be free, but they didn't want everyone to be free. I mean, that was kind of the fundamental contradiction. And that contradiction is still with us, which is we want people to have rights, but just not too many rights.
Right.
And just not rights for that people or those people. And that we're still living with that today.
Right. This idea of ballot initiatives is reminding me of the race that we are talking about tonight, the public advocate race, because like a lot of the parties or the platforms they're running on are these is agenda-based messaging, like fix the MTA and like, no more being late and shit because the train sucks so bad, pay more people, livable city, like this position. What do you know about this race, public advocate race?
Not a lot. I mean, I imagine
something Ari Berman needs to learn about. I guess he's not an expert.
Good thing you have 3 more coming.
Yeah.
But I mean, you just look at who the public advocates have been. So the last public advocate, Tish James, she's now the New York State Attorney General, an extremely powerful position where she's suing the Trump administration on everything. The previous public advocate is now the mayor, Bill de Blasio. So, I mean, first off, it's obviously a position you get a lot of visibility and potentially could then become something higher. But what's cool to me about this is it is, in a way, talking about furthering democracy because they don't really work for anybody. They don't work for the mayor.
And they're nonpartisan position.
They don't work for the city council. So that theoretically they work for the people and they can raise issues that politicians for one reason or another are afraid to touch. And so they can hold the mayor accountable and stuff. They can hold the city council accountable and stuff. They can advocate for what people are thinking, and they might be able to talk about the subway in a way that politicians can't. Or they might be able to talk about real estate developers basically destroying the city. I would hope they would talk about that everything on the corner is now a Duane Reade or a Walgreens. And it's like, well, you can get shampoo everywhere, but you can't afford to live anywhere.
Right.
And so like, hopefully they can address that. So I mean, I think and again, it's like, it's a position that is like kind of a blank slate. Like, you can create it as you want, which is cool. Because a lot of these things come in, like there's a lot of offices you come in and like you're shackled from the beginning. And here, like their power can be kind of limited, but in terms of the imagination of what they can do, that's a lot broader.
Because some people, like, I was watching this video of this city councilman who's like, it's a bullshit job. Don't need it. You know what I mean? But is that because the public advocate checks the city council?
Yeah, and I mean, I think if it was such a bullshit job, 23 people wouldn't be running for it.
Right.
Clearly, someone thinks. I mean, this is the same thing I said about voting. Like, people who say, well, voting doesn't matter. Well, I would say, well, someone thinks voting matters, or else they wouldn't be trying to keep you from voting.
Right.
I mean, so clearly, like, somebody has spent a lot of time believing that voting matters. And I mean, I think in the same thing with the public advocate, whether or not they view it as like a stepping stone to another position, or whether they view it as like, this is a thing that you get a lot of visibility and you can raise a lot of important issues and not be shackled by being responsible to this constituency or that constituency. People feel like it has power.
I know, I'm like, I wish there were more positions like public advocate that were nonpartisan and not shackled.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, we'll bring them on next, and you've really set us up to vote for the position, the election, the special election that's ahead. Thank you so much, Ari Berman.
Good to see you again.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, voting is pretty cool, huh? Somebody thinks it's important. I love that. So this election that's coming up, you know, it's like, who cares or whatever, but there's only 3 to 6% voter turnout in New York City for the public advocate race. That's mortifying. That's embarrassing. That's so low, and this is a position, it's set up to potentially succeed. You know, it's set up such that it could be important. So there's 22 people on the ballot. What is this? You know what I mean? Like, I'm like, what is this race? We have 7 guests total between tonight and tomorrow night. Tonight you'll meet 3 of them. This is not like, I'm not like, win us over, debate for us. You know what I mean? I'm just like, again, what is the position? Like, I need like some basics, and I just wanted all of us to get the chance to just meet some of the stars of the race. So we will, I gotta admit to you, I don't know when the election is. We'll ask them. But I really implore you to bring a fucking friend and really be aggressive to your boss. Be like, I have to come in late. You know what I mean? I'm voting, you know, bitch, at your boss or whatever, because it's your right. So, okay, let's bring up the 3 candidates. Tonight, you will meet Dawn Smalls, who's running on No More Delays. She's a former lawyer on the Obama administration. Okay. Woo! Give it up for Dawn. You will meet Nomiki Konst, running on the Pay More People platform. She's a journalist and activist. And finally, Rafael Espinal, running on the Livable City. He's a Brooklyn city councilman. Give it up for these candidates. Okay, hi y'all.
Hi.
How are ya? Welcome. First of all, thank you for running for public advocate. We're not. You know what I mean? Like, it's really important.
It
cool.
seems like the whole candidate slate's here tonight.
Yeah.
Or everybody that's going to vote.
Yeah.
So vote.
Yeah, and hopefully everybody's going to bring one friend at least, and then we'll get it up to 10%. So few people vote for this. So why don't you introduce yourselves and just tell us somewhat briefly or whatever, just like how you got to running for this position. Dawn, go ahead.
Sure. So I'm Dawn, and I'm a mom. I have 3 kids, ages 3, 5, and 7. And I'm a lawyer, and I can answer your questions about what is a deposition.
Thank you. I have no idea.
I was
Dawn.
back in the green room saying, ah!
Yeah.
So I'm a litigator, and I work for one of the top litigation firms in the country. I've worked in, obviously, law, government, politics, and philanthropy. I've worked for 2 Democratic presidential administrations, 2 of the largest philanthropies. But the reason that I'm running for public advocate, because of all the things that I am not an elected official. And I think it's really special to be in this audience because to me, what drove me to run for office is the fact that I feel like the world is on fire right now. And we are not going to fix what's wrong unless people step up and run, people step up and engage in ways that may be a little bit uncomfortable and may feel a little bit like a stretch. So while I feel like I'm bringing a lot to this race, I look out at all of you, and I'm hoping that we're linking arms and doing this together, because this is the only way we're going to see ourselves out of this moment.
You hear that? Yeah, give it up. Thank you for running. Nomiki.
Hi. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for being here.
Is it too late to say that Vic Barrett should run for public advocate? Because Vic will annihilate us.
Yeah.
Vic understands that climate is a real issue and that we have to deal with it. And frankly, I don't think our government makes it as much of a priority as Vic Barrett does and so many other activists like yourself. So my name is Nomiki Konst. I started off as an activist. I organized my first protest over the environment when I was 6. I moved on. I ended up, I was an intern for Hillary Clinton when I was 16, was a national co-chair for Barack Obama when I was just over 20. And I ended up becoming an investigative reporter because after working in activism and politics, I realized there was a lot of corruption happening right before me, right in front of my eyes on the Republican side and the Democratic side. I was trained by a man named Wayne Barrett. Most of you here probably don't remember him. He was arguably the most famous investigative reporter in New York City politics. His reporting put more corrupt politicians in jail than probably any U.S. attorney in New York City politics. And he trained me about a decade ago. And I learned about the injustices that were happening in New York City, where I moved. I thought, New York, the most progressive city in the country. I can find a path here. Well, I have lived in over 12 apartments since I've lived in New York, as I'm sure many in here have that experience. And I realized that the inequality in this city is really rooted with the government. We have the worst income inequality in this country than any other moment in history, and New York City has the worst income inequality in the country. So 1929, when the stock market crashed, 2008 when it crashed again, income inequality is worse today than ever. And the real estate industry, as I learned through my reporting, is at the heart of everything from the Senate being held up with the IDC to council members rezoning their neighborhoods and people being evicted from their longtime homes. I want to use this job the way it was intended. It's supposed to be an investigative office, not a stepping stone for a higher office. It's supposed to be the ombudsman of the city. I was honored enough to serve as the ombudsman before the Democratic Party for 2 years to investigate the Democratic Party. So I think that
Nomiki,
that's my intention. And I'll talk forever.
What's ombudsman?
Oh, great question. It's a Swedish word. True, really it is. The ombudsman is there to be the oversight, to make sure that whether it's a government agency or a political party is doing their job. It's like a watchdog, and that's what this office is. It's actually in the charter written that way, the watchdog, the ombudsman.
So it's a watchdog for corruption, not like a nag, making sure you're doing it.
Yeah, I mean, my mom might say
No, it's
I'm
a nag.
It's a nag. I love to nag.
Like, you drop the ball on that. Right? Fix it now. And so I think that's an important part of what the public advocate does, is call stuff out when the mayor is falling short or city government is falling short. And as you said, acting as a watchdog.
Gotcha. Great. Thank you. And yeah, give it up for Nomiki. Thank you for running, Nomiki. And Rafael, how'd you get to this seat? How'd you get into this situation?
By accident, actually. I was a film major in college, but I grew up in East New York, Brooklyn, probably one of the most disinvested neighborhoods in the city. And, I lived with survivor's guilt. How did I get out of one of the most dangerous neighborhoods and be able to go to college, graduate? And I felt I had a responsibility to really get involved in the political process and be able to give back to my community by fighting city and state government. I would say I've been successful in doing that. I got over $300 million to rebuild a community that has suffered through decades of disinvestment, unemployment, crumbling infrastructure. And I've passed a lot of great legislation to move the city forward. I made dancing legal in New York City with the repeal of the cabaret law. I'm the guy fighting the plastic straws and single-use plastics here in New York. I also require for all gender bathrooms to have diaper change stations to create gender parity across the board.
Incredible.
And I see the public advocate position as an opportunity to kind of elevate the work I've been doing, but also be able to go to different communities, talk to different people, and use the power of the people to hold the mayor accountable and pass legislation to move the city forward. It's getting harder and harder to live here. We're being squeezed out, or we're deciding to pack up and leave. I've seen a lot of my friends go to Texas, go to Pittsburgh, go to California, because it's much more livable there. And I think it's time that we have someone who understands the impact of the increased cost of living, the impact of only luxury housing being built in communities, and how can we make sure that New York City continues being the iconic place that it's always been. And I think we do that by protecting its diversity. And we need someone who as a true New Yorker, understands the importance of that value and making sure we make that happen.
Love it. Thank you. Thank you for running. How long have you been in city council?
5 years now. 5 years.
Gotcha.
I ran for office at the age of 26, 27.
Wow.
I was the youngest member of the state assembly. I'm extremely lucky, extremely privileged, but I did it because I wanted to see government work for the people.
And how long is a city council term?
2 4-year terms. Yeah, and that's it. So I have 3 years left.
Gotcha.
I've grown a huge passion for the job, to legislate. I think I see this as an opportunity to continue that work.
What happens if you get public advocate? You don't continue city council?
No, I stay as a city council member for another 3 years.
And public advocate at the same time?
No. If you win the public advocacy, you actually become the public advocate.
Yeah.
And you let go of the city council position.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool. I was like, that's not going to work out time-wise. Okay, cool. Okay, so again, like, I'm just asking, like, how this position works. You know what I mean? For us to, like, build a, you know, this isn't like a debate exactly. It's more just to, like, talk it out. Like, how can the public advocate change the real estate lobby? And how long is the position? 2 years, public advocate?
Well, this
4?
is a funny one because we're running the elections on February 26th. Don't get confused. It's really confusing. And thank you, New York. Where's Ari Berman? He needs to explain it.
Yeah,
This is
whack. What the election?
So,
what's up with it?
This is the craziest election in probably the history of New York. We have a special election, new campaign finance laws. We just had an election in November, confusing enough. Now we have an election on February 26th. We just passed with our new Senate voting reform laws. So now the primary for public advocate, whoever wins, on the day of the election has to start petitioning for the primary in June, which was supposed to be in September. So you have to run again right afterwards. And then you have another election in 2021.
Because Tish James was public advocate,
Correct.
and then she got attorney general. So then whoever's running now is filling that spot. And it's assumed that they're going to get the primary. But after the primary in June, it's over. That's the one. No, then September
November.
again? November, yeah.
Oh. Get on your voting shoes, guys.
Yeah. I mean, either which way, it's like, just to be encouraging, it's just like, you know, either which way, it's good to vote as much as you can because it's a privilege that people have literally died for. But it's annoying. I mean, like 3, you know what I mean? That's annoying.
Yeah, it is.
I'll be real about
and
that.
the funny part is you have to petition the day of the election.
Yeah.
So the day of February 26th, you have to petition again to be on the ballot for the election in June. So it's nonstop.
Crazy.
Yeah,
I just feel like people need to focus on February 26th.
Yeah.
February
That's right.
26th.
There's a lot of inside baseball that
Right.
we need to worry about,
Right.
but the bottom line is there's an election on February 26th, and the person that is elected on February 26th will complete the remainder of Tish James's term, which is the end of 2019. There will be other elections that will get back on a regular cycle. But I feel like the
February
discussion
26th.
the discussion is going in a way that feels a little intimidating.
Love it.
Where at the end of the day, February 26th
is the
go
day.
to the polls, public advocate.
Asking tough questions.
February 26th.
February
That's it.
26th.
Cool. Love it.
Yes.
So how does the public advocate, what does it look like for the public advocate to get into the real estate lobby? How?
Well, I would say, one, you do have the power to legislate, right? So you can push for, more local actions here in the city to make sure people who rent stabilized apartments are not being harassed, making sure the city budget every year includes funding for legal support for those who are being pushed out of their apartments. But you also, you are the public advocate. So you should travel to Albany where the real action happens, where the real laws that really dictate how much rent you're going to pay in your next year are happening. So you're going to have someone who's going to take the train, go up there, push the governor, push the state legislature to make sure that rent reforms are reflecting the reforms we need here in New York.
Right.
So we have a Democratic Senate now, which we haven't had in decades. And the problem that we've had in this city is that we haven't controlled our own rent laws because of this thing called the Erstat law, very simplified version. Now we're going to have a Democratic Senate, and there are new rent laws up this year. So yes, a lot of it is in Albany, but because we have a Democratic Senate, we may have power in this city once again. But the Public Advocate's Office, it actually came out of a real estate corruption scandal in the late 80s. Many people don't know this. It was put in place because the real estate industry developers were deregulated in the mid-70s. Donald Trump actually was the architect of one of the biggest tax schemes. He bought out a bankrupt hotel called the Commodore Hotel, and in that one deal, he saved over $40 billion in taxes, excuse me. And then he duplicated that over and over again. And then multiple developers have done the same thing. The Public Advocate is there to shine a light on real estate, to investigate real estate. I, as an investigative reporter, have done a lot of that work. I think that we need to strengthen the role of investigations when it comes to this industry because they are operating in the shadows. They have literally given money to every single city council member and the mayor in New York City. And so we have a city council that's very progressive on a lot of issues, but it's that 10% that the real estate determines whether or not a neighborhood's rezoned and someone's kicked out of their neighborhood. So I think the Public Advocate is there to be separate from the politics, separate from the industry that's really owned our city government, and to shine a light and expose what's happening and to push for stronger legislation because we will soon have that power now that Democrats control the Senate.
I would just add that the Public Advocate has an appointee on the City Zoning Commission, so that's another important piece of how the Public Advocate can fight against the real estate industry and its influence on the city.
Gotcha. Because I'm trying to just put it together. There's legislation. You also go up to Albany and you fight. You shine light on shit.
You litigate. That's a component of the job.
This appointee.
This appointee on the zoning commission, and I would say shine a light, investigate, and demand information from city agencies, legislate in terms of the city council, and then fourth, advance litigation.
Yeah, and when you say litigation, I'm like, you're a lawyer, but you don't have to be a lawyer to be the public advocate.
I would say you do, but
one might say, you know what I mean? Sorry, you guys. I mean, the way you're framing it, it's like, you litigate and you're saying you investigate. I mean, there's different ways of doing it. Does the Public Advocate have a team of lawyers?
I mean, if I get elected, I'll hire a lot of lawyers. So if anyone's a lawyer, I'd love to see your resume. But you do have a team. And just as you do as a council member, I don't write my own legislation. I propose ideas to my lawyers. Their job is to research the laws. Their job is to come up with something. And my job is to review that and see whether it makes sense and whether it's what I'm trying to push forward. So you can have that same flexibility as Public Advocate. You have your team, you have your idea, and their job is to execute it.
But no subpoena power, which is something that's often brought up. Should it have? I think the Public Advocate's office, to put this into context, the highest paid official in New York City is a loan shark who represents the banks. One person makes over $7.5 million. The office that's supposed to represent the most vulnerable communities of New York, this entire office of Public Advocate, second most powerful office in the city, has a $3.5 million budget right now. And so there's no subpoena power. There's not a lot of independence. There's not a lot of muscle to flex. This has been a constant conversation in this race. Should the office have subpoena power? I believe so. I think all of us on stage, I don't think anybody disagrees. But frankly, the office needs to have a little bit more budgetary power as well.
But the office does matter. I feel like when you focus on all of the office's shortcomings, again, we're trying to get people to get out on February 26th and understand the importance of why it's important to vote on February 26th. I will say that
February 26th?
February 26th. The Public Advocate, if for no other reason, you should care about this role because if the mayor keels over, the Public Advocate becomes mayor. That's a true fact. So if nothing else, it matters who becomes this role. But we are all running, or at least I'll speak for myself. I am running because I believe that the Public Advocate role is an important role to provide an independent check on the mayor and city government in how well the city government provides services to New Yorkers. And you can do that by alone just calling things out. I've called out fair fares. That's a program that the mayor announced with great fanfare last year and was supposed to be announced January 1st, which would provide reduced price Metro cards to eligible New Yorkers. January 1st comes, no idea who's eligible, no idea how to apply, no idea how to pick up a card. That is a perfect issue for the public advocate to stay on top of, to again make sure that New Yorkers get the services that are promised to them and the services they deserve.
And what does it look like, Dawn, to like make fanfare? What does it look like to call it out? Like going to the press, posting about it? You know
I just start dancing in the street.
Hey!
It's legal now. It's legal. You can do that.
Right, exactly.
Thank you, Rafael.
Thank you.
Dancing, fucking footloose. What's going on? Yeah, what does it look like?
I think it means going to the press. I think public advocates have issued reports. The bad landlords list is a good example of that.
What is that?
It is a report that the public advocate puts out of the worst landlords in the city. The number one is NYCHA.
Wow.
It is well deserved.
Yeah.
Their number one spot. But meetings, press conferences, reports. I think there's lots of ways to call attention to issues, but having an independent, there are only 3 citywide officials, the mayor, the comptroller, and public advocate, and having an independent citywide official whose only purpose is to hold the city government accountable in how well they serve you. I think that's an important role, and I think it's worth you coming out to vote on February 26th.
I think so too.
Yeah, and I just want to stress the importance of you getting involved. I think in 2016, when Bernie Sanders was running, he stressed the importance of you being part of the process. The public advocate, I believe, is only as strong as how many voters came out to elect them. And if we're able to use that energy to really make change, to really change the conversation and change public opinion, especially on policies maybe the mayor and the governor are pushing forward, there's real strength in that. There's real influence in that. That's why it's important everyone gets to vote.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. And I wanted to ask about the trains too and the MTA. I mean, I guess it's like the same vibe. You're calling it out, you're litigating, you're making legislation. I don't know. What's up with the MTA? What does that look like? Is that Albany and the city? Who are you going to?
Go ahead. Pick, Ilana.
I can't. You guys.
I would say go Albany, and you have to go to Albany, and you have to. The mayor too. I mean, we've seen it all last summer and the last year when they're busy fighting each other about who should pay for what. Everyone should pay their fair share. I mean, I think it's time that we focus on the issue than figuring out who should do what. I think the public advocate plays that important role, stepping in and saying, let's stop, pushing, passing the buck here. People need to see results. I have a plan. My plan is to go after Wall Street. Wall Street currently receives $11 billion in rebates, meaning every time they file their taxes, at the end of the year, they get all their taxes back.
$11 billion.
Yeah.
The people who are already rich are getting their taxes back.
From the city and state of New York. It's like us filing our taxes and then a week later we get our money back. How great that would be. That's what's happening there. The MTA, we need about $40 million to fix the problem. If we're able to get that rebate back, we can fix the problem in 4 years.
Wow. Damn.
So I love the idea of this tax. It's a federal issue, and this is a city issue. And
it's a city issue.
Well, so see, you don't want to debate. Don't want to debate, and you put 3 candidates on stage.
Yeah.
So the MTA is deeply corrupt. We have developers on the board of the MTA that don't live in New York City, one of which was the secretary to the governor, who said just a month ago during World Disability Day that he's never taken the bus before. These are the people determining how the city's lifeblood, the lifeblood of a city, how it survives. Their solution for fixing the MTA's problem is to arrest kids who are jumping turnstiles, to increase the fares on us, working people. We have an inaccessibility problem. We have, the train signals are 100 years old. But at the root of it, which no politician wants to touch, is we are not taxing our real estate developers. They are the ones, hundreds of trillions of dollars have been sucked from the city, and they're the ones making the most money off the city. Yes, Wall Street should absolutely be taxed, but at the root of it, no politician wants to touch the real estate industry, and they're the ones who've made this city decrepit. As soon as they were deregulated, that's when the infrastructure of our city started to collapse in the mid-'70s.
So I just offered two things on the subway. I've made that one of my core platform issues and would organize my office, even with its limited budget, to have a team of people that focused on the subway all day, every day. So measuring every deliverable, every benchmark, every funding stream, and reporting out to the public in real time rather than waiting for an expose from the New York Times saying that the mayor refused to meet with the new subway chief for 6 months. Having somebody that literally is on that issue all the time, I think, the issue merits the focus, and I think by greater focus, you bring greater progress. I also want to touch on an issue that was touched on a little bit, which is about the governance of the MTA, which is critically important when you have a situation. It's a 17-member board. 8 are appointed by the governor, and 4 are appointed by the mayor, and then there's a whole host of county committee people. But the bottom line is that the structure is set up that both the mayor and the governor both point the finger at each other and say, well, I'm not responsible for the MTA. Somebody has to be ultimately responsible. We had a woman die from trying to get her stroller down the stairs, something that I have done many a time with one of my 3 children trying to get down the stairs from an inaccessible station. And the mayor sent out this tweet saying, this is so horrible, the MTA should fix it. Like it's this independent third party, like he doesn't know them. He's looking the other way. As public advocate, I would hold the mayor accountable and frankly the governor accountable for taking responsibility for this critical service that is critical to the infrastructure and the livability of our city.
Crazy, like who else would it be?
Who else would it be?
Right.
Who do you think?
He's looking the other way.
And it's like it's the first name on your handle, mayor. You know what I mean? Like you're the mayor, bro.
Right.
Wild. That's wild. What else? What other? What other subjects are you guys, like platforms, are you guys running on? What are your NYCHA?
NYCHA. So the largest landlord in the entire country is the New York City Housing Authority. 1 in 8 New Yorkers live in New York City housing. I don't know if you guys have seen the cover of the papers for the last several years, but not only is there a lead poisoning crisis in NYCHA, where 1 in 8 New Yorkers is the size of Boston. Let's just put that into context here. That's the size of Boston. 1 in 8 New Yorkers have been exposed to lead. Children have been exposed to lead. I was in Red Hook just the other day talking to some mothers who had children that have lead poisoning. But many New Yorkers didn't find out they had lead poisoning. They had developmental issues, but they didn't find out until they were 18. And they can't sue the government now because they had, eaten some lead paint. There's a crisis when it comes to hot water and heat. The same mothers I spoke to didn't have hot water on Thanksgiving Day. And when they put in complaints, it goes nowhere. You have to file it the right way. You don't hear back for 6 months. You didn't file with the right department. NYCHA is a management disaster. It's owed $32 billion, and possibly another 40 in the next couple of years. And it's some of it has to do with the federal government and HUD, but a lot of it has to do with whether or not we are funding NYCHA properly. And again, our city is starved. The people that should be paying taxes are not paying taxes, and the first who are hurt, whether it comes to climate change or disasters when it comes to NYCHA management, are the poor communities of our city.
So it's really housing and the MTA, basically. That's like the checks that need to take place, right? Like, is healthcare on the agenda?
I would add the environment.
Yeah.
I'm running on a strong green platform. I think it's time that New York City steps up and becomes part of the conversation. There are cities across the country who have committed to go 100% renewable by 2030. We're looking at 80% by 2050, 2040. We're not being aggressive enough. UN came out with a report. Over 75% of carbon emissions are coming from major cities. So why are we not doing our part? And I think it's time that we look at the building developers. What can they do to make sure that they're reducing the carbon footprint in the city?
Right, you have that green roof initiative, right?
Yeah. We had a big hearing yesterday about requiring all roofs in New York City to go green, meaning green like the Barclays Center, solar panels, wind turbines. This is happening in Portland. It's happening in San Francisco. It's happening in Toronto. This is New York City. It's time for us to do the right thing.
And if I can just add one more thing to that, the biggest contributor to pollution in this country is fracked gas. And we have banned fracked gas in this state. I was, very much part of that activism that banned fracked gas in New York State, but we are still importing it. We still have fracked gas power plants. And for those of you who don't know how bad it is 300 times worse than carbon.
Wow.
It is the number one emitter of pollution on the planet. The EU banned it. Yet most of our homes, back to developers, Con Ed doesn't want to shift, but they're willing to improve the pipelines right now, spends billions of dollars. They should just shift off of fracked gas. The number one emissions in this city comes from buildings because of gas. It's not cars, it's not smokestacks, it's fracked gas. We have to stop importing it into this city, or else we're gonna be underwater, sorry to break it to you, in 12 years.
So
I also wanted to add the issue of homelessness, which is another core part of my platform. When we think about homelessness, we often think of a middle-aged man that may be suffering from addiction or substance abuse. In fact, there are more children 6 and under that are homeless in this city than there are single men. This is very much a women's issue, a children's issue. I want to make sure right now there is no priority in the affordable housing lottery for women and young families, which seems crazy to me. So making sure that we change the frame around that as well. I also wanted to say one more thing, because I do think it's significant, is that right now the city's leadership is all white men. So there are 4 citywide power positions in New York City: the mayor, the comptroller, the city council speaker, and then the 4th is the public advocate. And now that Tish James is our attorney general, there are no women in the city's leadership. And in a city that is supposed to be a national leader on progressive values, there are 22 people on the ballot. They can find a woman. And I believe that I'm the most qualified candidate, male or female, but we are not in the stage of binders full of women. There is absolutely no reason you cannot find a woman to be elected to be the next public advocate.
That's right. Like all these other cities, is it just the real estate? Is it the real estate industry that is speeding up all the awful shit in our city, that we're so aggressive to build that's why, you're saying like Portland's done initiatives, these other cities, is it just real estate really that's really ruining the cities when the banks bought their debt in the late 80s?
I would say the major root issues in the city, yes. When you look at the state Senate being held up, for those of you who don't know, up until January, we had 8 Democrats in the state Senate who were conferencing with Republicans, holding up all progress, whether it was protecting women's right to choose, whether it was being a sanctuary state, whether it was climate change issues, every single issue you could possibly imagine that New York State, which has a Democratic assembly, a Democratic governor, a city that's made up of Democrats, we had issue after issue being blocked because you had 8 Democrats who were conferencing with Republicans who made a deal for bigger offices.
We covered them, the IDC, and it's funny, you're like making me realize, right, that's what calling out is. We called them out so hard.
That's right.
We like tagged them. We had this like video that we just tagged. It's just like making noise, basically. I don't know if anybody was here at those ones. Yeah, the Independent Democrats conference, and it was really fun to call them out.
They were funded by real estate developers and charter schools. And a lot of people don't realize that charter schools, it's actually a real huge real estate deal. They use education as a front, as a nonprofit front. But what they're doing is they're buying up properties. And just like Chase Bank buys a corner, and you're like, wait, there are no people in here. There's just like 5 tellers. Why are you spending all this money on this corner for a Chase Bank? Well, it's a real estate deal. Everything is about real estate in New York City. I don't know about the rest of the country. I think London has this issue, San Francisco has this issue, Miami has this issue. I can't speak for every city, but in New York, it's definitely at the root.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing a lot of our favorite small businesses close down. We're seeing a lot of our favorite music venues close down. And it's because of real estate greed. And everyone wants to make a buck. And what they're putting at risk is the city's culture, the city's vibrancy. We have a TD Bank across the street that probably used to be one of the coolest bars in the area. And that's the things we have to think about. How do we stop real estate from destroying the culture of our communities and hold them accountable, making sure that they're actually making real investments that's going to keep New York City vibrant and alive?
Damn, right? Wow, this shit is like illuminating. It's just, there's these roles that we know nothing about, and if maximized, real shit can get done. There's who's checking the system? We're like asking these questions, and it's like the system does have positions in place that make it possible to serve the people again.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what has been great, the silver lining over the past 2 years is that people are becoming more engaged, right? And we're noticing how important local government is. I think this is a real opportunity for us to be able to vote for a public advocate that's going to start shaping the conversation for the next 2 years. The next 2 years, there'll be the mayoral election. If we're able to vote for someone who reflects our values, we send a signal to City Hall saying this is the way we want city government to start moving.
That's right. Bless you. God bless. Well, thank you three so much for coming. Thank you so much for running. Thank you for running.
Thank you.
Thank you. It does not look easy. It does not look relaxing. Thank you so much. On February 26th, we will all be voting and bringing a friend. Thank you so much, and thank you all. Thank you.